What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we return with Nilo of the almighty Insomnium. It is great to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. The new album, Anno 1696, is an absolutely killer album. For people who haven't heard the full length album yet, could the first singles that we heard, White Christ, Lillian, and The Witch Hunter, serve as a good representation of the entirety of this album, or is that just scratching the surface of what's to come?
Well, it's a good starting point. These three songs. I think if you pick only one song to represent the album, it would be "God Forsaken," which is gonna be single number 4. That's a long one, but I think these three singles already show most of the sides on this album. The almost the full scale, at least what people can expect with Anno 1696.
Mm-hmm. Was the intention of this album to just sort of like make a continuation of Heart Like a Grave, or being that, a lot has happened since Heart Like a Grave and now this is meant to almost kind of signify a new beginning for Insomnium?
I think musically this is closer to Winter's Gate than Heart Like a Grave, but that's just my humble opinion. And originally I had this idea of this concept already in 2019. I talked it with the guys already, and that I have this 17th century story in my mind. It would be cool to make a concept album from that. But then COVID started and plans changed, and we did Argent Moon EP first, and it was deliberately an easier kind of collection of ballads, so to say. But already at that point, we knew next album it must be more harsh, dark, brutal. So because the story is very, very dark and tragic, so the music has to have the same feeling. So we knew that some people might say after hearing Argent Moon EP that, okay, now the guys have gone soft and radio friendly, but plan was all along to make quite heavy album next. So that's where we are now.
Well, it's funny to hear you compare this album to Winter's Gate, because I know that Winter's Gate was an album that was kind of like meant to be listened to chronologically. It was kind of like a one song big album, whereas for Anno 1696, it is divided into more different types of songs. As we have the 3 singles and almost 4 now. But so is Anno 1696 meant to kind of be listened to in a similar way as Winter's Gate? It's meant to kind of be like a one sort of song album in a way, or does every song sort of stand out in its own right?
Well, it's a concept album like Winter's Gate, and there's one big story. There's my short story there that comes with the album, same way as with Winter's Gate. And the lyrics are telling the same big story, but like musically, of course, I didn't mean it's one song like Winter's Gate, but like I think it's kind of colder, more desperate than Heart Like a Grave, which is very melancholic album as well. But like personally, I feel that we are now like there are maybe more like black metalish elements here now again, like we had with Winter's Gate, which really kind of, I think it captures the mood of the story really well. It's dealing with very dark things, and that kind of, so these kind of melodies and themes fit this tragic story, I feel.
Mm-hmm. With this tragic story, and being that concept albums is nothing new for Insomnium, have you always thought of the concept before you started writing the album and you would write according to that, or do you prefer to like have some music and compositions already written before this is what the album is going to be about?
Well, it varies. With Winter's Gate, we used this short story that I had written already some years ago, which had won this short story contest. But this time I specifically wrote the story for Insomnium and to be used in this album. And But in this case, I finished it quite early, and the guys read the story, thought it was a cool thing, and agreed, okay, let's make concept album from this. So most of the music was composed after the story was finished. So it really became soundtrack for this story. And so I think all of us but we have 4 composers in the band, and I think we all got into the same kind of mindset and mood when making the songs, when making the compositions. So kind of we had the story already in our heads when we were writing the music. So this time the story was first, and at least most of the music came after that.
When you write a concept album, and because all of Insomnium's music is a very emotional experience, is these concepts a direct representation of you? Are these a self-portrait of your emotions and what you were feeling, or are these concepts kind of like external sources of inspiration and you're almost kind of like being the sort of like narrator of the story?
Well, of course, every writer puts something from himself or herself into the characters that he is writing, and of course, this kind of investigator character in the story, Arvid, well, he's quite close of me personally, but other characters in the story are totally different, and we have this religious fanatic witch hunter who believes he's saving the world, he's saving everyone, he's finding the witches and burning them, and he believes he's the good guy, of course. But from a modern day reader perspective, it looks like a lunatic, but he has a reason for what he's doing. He's a deeply religious person and believes that he's doing the work of God there when he's finding the witches. So there are different characters, of course, which I try to write them so that they are like realistically motivated, and they all have their own agendas and own feelings and beliefs, which and then they act according to those things. So like I didn't have any like kind of personal agenda when writing the story. It's more like I wanted to write this, well, dark, dramatic and touching story set in this era in history, because it's a very fascinating era in history. And also some people have asked if it's a like metaphor for modern days, what's going on in the world right now, but no, it's not. The idea already, like I got it at least 2019, so before all these crazy things started happening, what has going on in a couple of recent years. So, but yeah, you can now afterwards say that humankind hasn't learned much or evolved. There are still very stupid people who are easily led to believing various like lies and then doing very stupid things, well, even in very civilized countries.
Now that you mention this concept and after you explain it to it almost seems like this album is representative of one of my personal favorite quotes, and that is, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." And I think that's sort of like the because and never will I justify any of the horrible, abhorrent acts done by humanity, but most of the time when acts, regardless if it's done by an evil dictator or some sort of, what they think they're doing is good, and they justify it based on their beliefs in a way, which I think is kind of disgusting. So it is almost kind of like this evil was done with good intentions in a way. That's almost kind of how I look at it. It's almost kind of like the accepting of the fact that all evil has been created with the intention of being good.
Well, most of the times, yes, for sure. Like most of the wars, people starting those wars are somehow justifying it, probably to themselves and the others, that there is a good reason for this and we are fighting for the right cause or something. But yes, and like these witch hunter characters in my story, that like they believe they are the heroes and they think they are doing the good thing there. So it's well, it's a universal thing, I believe, and like most people believe that they are right and they are the good guys,
Definitely.
even though they would do stupid stuff.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate duality. And I wanted to ask this before, but you know, when you're going to be bringing this album out on the road, and I'm very much looking forward to that Enslaved tour. But when you bring this album out on the road, obviously you have to bring a set list together of new material as well as some older material. So you're going to have to throw some Winter Skate songs, especially since it's been 20 years since in the halls of awaiting. You know, it's gonna people are going to maybe want to hear some deep cuts from that. So when you sort of like shuffle around your set list in a way and bring songs from different eras, does that almost bring a new type of context to the song or the album?
Good question, and it's it's always, well, it gets more tricky and tricky to pick the set list because we have now done 9 albums and EP and some singles here and there, so there's a lot of stuff we have recorded, like almost 100 songs we could play. So, but we try to play something older. Of course, many songs are from the newest album because that's what we're promoting, and people haven't heard those songs ever, so it makes sense to play them. But like if you pick a really old song, put it amidst the newer ones, it can feel different than before, and you can see it in a new light. So it can kind of change, or the feeling can change of compared to what it was before because of the context, and the other songs it somehow feels different now. So I don't know if I answered your question.
You definitely did, and you're right. It is going to get harder, and you're always going to have that one diehard fan who like wants like you to play like the deep cut off of like an early demo from like before you even like got in the first practice phase or something like that. So you can't satisfy everybody.
Yeah, exactly, and we know it and we can't, but so we just pick the songs that we like to play, and of course we want to kind of renew the set list so we don't always play the same old songs, and we kind of recycle them a bit.
Yeah. When it comes to expressing these dark and emotional concepts, because every Insomnium album is a very emotional experience, and seeing you live is also a very emotional experience. When darkness and, you know, this sort of, you know, evil, especially that you're portraying in Anno 1696, when darkness is your main source of inspiration, though, can that make the songwriting process just as painful or deteriorating as it can be cathartic in a way? Like, do you almost feel like sometimes you could become a victim of your own product when darkness is sort of like your main source of inspiration?
Uh, well, if you just talk about composing the songs, I think well, we do the kind of music we love, and well, that feels great. And when you create a good riff and you have a good feeling about it, like okay, this is gonna be good. That's kind of the best feelings, and something you always want to have more and more of that. When you try to make a good song and you have the feeling that this might be good riff now, and I don't think there is. Well, the darkness and misery comes from those moments when you are not like making progress, and you think, oh, I'm the worst composer in the world. This is horrible shit. I've been doing this the whole day, and this still sounds like shit. So that's when the misery strikes. But otherwise, composing is really like uplifting business, and then writing the stories, writing the lyrics. Yes, they deal with dark things, and there are some very personal lyrics I have done, which kind of I have written from a very painful personal experiences, and writing those and then performing those live. Sometimes it is really, well, it touches you. So there are some songs that are like that, which are very personal,
Yeah. I,
which are written. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's just like because when I listen to a song like "The Harrowing Years," for example, like that to me has submerses you in a realm of melancholy. But I think a song like "While We Sleep," the melody that goes into that is very triumphant in a way. So I feel like you do have anthems for both greatest moments of victory and greatest moments of despair. I think that's what the sort of Insomnium catalog is about to represent, or always has represented.
yes, you're right, and like we don't want to be like one feeling bad that it would be all just doom and gloom and desperation, but there is that glimpse of hope somewhere, and at least in some songs, like on the newest album, Lillian's song is a bit more kind of hopeful than the others, and from the story, I got this kind of flashback moment where this tragic couple meet in the first place and they fell in love, and that kind of fits the mood of that composition. So it's kind of a small glimpse of light amidst the darkness that the rest of the album represents. So yeah, Insomnium is a band of contrasts. There are all kind of strong emotions. It's not just black
Yeah.
all the time. There has to be more colors to make it. Then the black feels kind of more effective and strong.
As a musician who expresses himself through multiple instruments, through both vocals and bass, does your two instruments, do they express the same side of you, or does one instrument that you utilize express a different side of you that only the bass can represent and that only the vocals can represent?
When I'm composing, I'm usually doing with acoustic guitar or keyboards. Um, and then I'm just thinking about the song, what is best for the song, how will I make it the best possible, but and in a live situation, like I've always both played the bass and been singing on stage, so it would be hard to do just either one of them. Like if I would have to perform without the bass, just singing, it would feel stupid. Like I wouldn't know what to do with my hands, and how are you going to be on stage? Like you have to do some kicks like Bruce Dickinson, or what are you going to do there? Like I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah, you're the Peter Steele of melodic death metal. That's how I call you.
I will take that.
Yeah, or if you like this better, a sad Lemmy.
Yes, very sad. Melancholic Lemmy.
Melancholic Lemmy, melancholic head.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, but when you are expressing concept albums, is there almost kind of like a lot of research involved? Are you almost kind of like looking at other forms of art, like with Anno 1696? Are you looking at literature or film or visual art as a means of inspiration in a way? Or is it almost kind of like you're writing about maybe your own interpretation or your own reaction to these sort of ideas?
No, because well, I have studied history in university, and that's kind of my passion. And I want the details to be as accurate as possible. So I did quite a lot of research for writing this story. So all the facts, all the persons that are mentioned there, all these events they are real historical events and things that have happened. And actually, yesterday we had an interview here in Finland where there was me and the journalist and then a historian from the university, and she was specialized in 17th century history, and like she kind of she read the whole thing before the interview, and she kind of approved everything, and she actually said that she will use these lyrics when like she will show them to her students in the university,
That is
because they are representing 17th century history so well. And that was like, okay, wow, now my job is done well now. Kind of stamp of approval on the story that its facts are right.
That to me is one of the greatest accomplishments ever. If your song could be referenced in like a form of history, like I mean, people know about World War II because of Sabaton's music now, and people like are very obsessed with AI because of Fear Factory's music. So like, I think when your concept albums are actually being used as an academic, I think that's one of the greatest accomplishments that there is.
It is, and it felt really good. Like, and I was nervous beforehand. Like, what is she gonna say that? Oh, this is all this bullshit. This guy invented everything. It's not true. But like, I read a lot of books. I watched some films, and I tried to make it as accurate as possible. How to paint the 17th century world.
When when a listener, because all art is fairly open to interpretation, you know, there are people who may be discovering Insomnium for the first time. Like, there was a lot of Lacuna Coil and Epica fans when I saw you on that tour never heard of Insomnium, so they weren't aware of these concepts. But when a listener is interpreting music in their own way and maybe meets you and discusses their vision or their emotion that came from the song, do you think that adds a whole other layer of context to the material as well?
Yeah, of course, and you kind of, everyone makes their own interpretations in the end, and every listener, I think they have their right to interpret the songs, and of course, it can be that someone kind of understands something wrong, and then I can say that, okay, I didn't mean that, like, but like, usually you have to give people kind of the freedom to experience and feel the songs how they want. And I, for example, lyrics, I will always try to write them so that there is kind of some room for kind of people to think themselves that everything is not written like too clearly, like this is what I mean, but people can actually read between the lines, and so there's some room to make your own.
Yeah, definitely. I have two more questions for you. And when it comes to, I do need to ask this for the fans because last year did mark 20 years since the world first heard Insomnium with In the Halls of Awaiting, the debut album. It's still a magical album to this day. What was the sort of like emotion or idea going into the debut of Insomnium, and kind of like how did you want to hit the ground running? Was there just as much of a conceptual nature behind it, or was it a very sort of like experimental and sort of a trial and error sort of process in the very beginning?
Well, we were young guys. We had never done an album before, so we were still kind of learning what to do in the studio, what is the best way to actually record them, who is going to mix this shit together, all these things. Like the first two albums, I think it was a process. We were learning how to be this band and what kind of music we are actually capable of doing, what kind of albums. So, and there were 5 demo songs on the first album, and then we made 5 more to make it a full-length album. And I just remember it was summer. We spent like half of the summer in this studio just recording and having fun and basically drinking almost every day. We were still in our early 20s, so we could do that. It was a good time. We were really enthusiastic about the whole thing. Like, God damn it, we can actually make a real album and someone is paying this studio. Like, we don't have to pay from our own pocket. So it was really cool thing. As I have really nice memories of those times.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I was only a little boy when that album came out, so I didn't discover it till much later. But it truly is like it has that debut charm behind it. You almost see the sort of what I call the genius, sort of like slowly emerging, and and that's what I love about certain bands, where you can almost like their catalog is almost a way of just watching them grow up and evolve.
Yeah, I totally agree that like if you listen to our discography from the start, you can see this, well, some kind of progression at least. I think with our first 3 albums, it evolves slowly, and I think we still keep evolving and turning to something new all the time, because we don't want to be the motorhead of death metal. We don't want to do the same songs, same albums over and over again. We want to try to do something different each time. So I hope we're still growing and learning.
Yeah, every album is like, I don't consider Honest 1696 to be a continuation of Heart Like a Grave. I don't consider Heart Like a Grave to be a continuation of Winter's Skate. I just think every album is like a continuation of your evolution.
Yeah, well said. I agree totally.
Thank you. And the final question I wanted to ask you is circling back to concept albums. In case you couldn't tell, I'm a concept album freak, and that's every time I hear concept albums or see concept albums, I'm like, this is going to be a good interview. But I've always said that art is life, and when you bring it into the world, it grows, it develops, and even sometimes it could eventually die too. But when you bring an album into the world, do you think that the concept could evolve over time as you evolve as an artist, or do you prefer if every album that you make is more or less a snapshot of who you are at that particular time? Do you prefer if Winter's Skate just stays in 2016, that Heart Like a Grave stays in 2019, etc.?
Well, the stories and lyrics are kind of timeless and universal, so they're not tied to some modern day moment or the year that they were actually made. So I hope they will like stay relevant, and like if somebody would make a concept album that would only like tell about the internet of 2023, it would sound outdated in a couple of years, and it would be a really stupid idea to do something like that. But when you're actually writing about timeless themes, love and death and strong emotion, it's universal. Everybody can relate to it. It doesn't get old. But of course, when time goes by and albums become part of history, some things might look different when you look after 10 or 20 years, and people interpret them in a different way. But that's how it goes.
Yeah, I couldn't. It's just like, because, you know, like people have asked me, you know, I was a emo metalcore kid, and people ask, how do you relate to this? It's like, well, how did you relate to the 80s stuff? Because that is what was happening at the time. The girls, and the, you know, Too Young to Fall in Love. That was what was going on through the kids in the 80s. When you're a kid in the mid 2000s, it's the Kill Switches and the All That Remains or the Shadows Falls that are resonating with you on a lyrical level. And I think, you know, I see that now. Like, I've noticed that like a lot of your fan base as adults, they started as metalcore fans, and now they're obsessed with like the melodic death metal aspect with you guys and Swallow the Sun and Omnium Gatherum, etc.
Yeah, and that's very cool. And of course, it goes like that. And like nobody should be ashamed of the music they did when they were kids or teens. Like people don't do that. Like, be proud of those bands that you liked when you were a kid, and if you still like them, please go on and don't mind what other people are saying. Like,
Yep.
because when you are a teenager or a kid, you fell in love for the first time, you find some music, the bands for the first time, you feel it so strongly, and they are probably going to be there for the rest of your life. Like, still when you're 90 years old, you will remember all that remains and Kill Switch songs. Probably that's how it goes, and it's good.
Oh man, End of Heartache. Oh, The Fall of Ideals. I remember listening to Not Alone when I was in 6th grade. Anyway, before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Is there just anything else with Insomnium you'd like to promote? I know you got the Enslaved and Black Anvil tour coming up. Just what else could we be expecting for the Anyo 1696 record cycle?
We have the Caribbean cruise now starting in a few days. I have to travel to Florida, sadly. And well, that's going to be a whole thing. But yeah, Enslaved tour, co-headline tour all around USA and Canada in April. It's going to be a really cool package. I think it's a very good package with Enslaved, especially our new album and Enslaved. They go together very nicely. And more American tours coming for sure. in the future. We always love to come back there.
Yeah, we'd love to have you here, and I wish you the best of luck in Florida. I know it's hard for Scandinavians to get all that sun. So,
Yeah, it's so horrible to leave it, Finland in January and go to the sun.
oh my God, it's like night and day.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Insomnium Anyo 1696. Be sure to check that out. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.